Okay, quickie project. I've got my new 3D printer up in my office, and I've ordered a custom dust cover for it from a person that has made custom dust covers for me before for some vintage computers and other things. And turned out she already had a pattern for a Prusa MK3S. She didn't have one for the Plus, but the dimensions she had for it, in my view, didn't leave enough depth to cover the printer all the way down to the benchtop or tabletop if there was already a full-size roll of filament on the holder on top of the printer. You'd have to remove that every time you wanted to put the dust cover on it. It also didn't have enough front to rear depth to have the dust cover up the LCD control panel on the front of the printer. That would be sticking out. And finally, it didn't have the right dimensions to avoid having the thick cable coming from the extruder head make a bulge on the back of the dust cover. So I had my own dimensions, my own ideas. She's cranking that thing out. Hopefully I'll have it in a couple of weeks. But all of that's predicated on having some sort of a simple framework to hold the top of the dust cover up, because the printer is not anything like a rectangular shaped three-dimensional object. It's basically got most of its volume down near the bottom, and then it has this vertical frame that sticks up and really is open space around that. So there's going to be something that has to hold the top of the dust cover up. I suppose you could just drape something over it, but I'd rather it be a little neater. So I just said, well, I'm going to whip something up, and if a better idea occurs to me, I'm going to whip something else up and, you know, make a newer version. My first idea was to do something with wire, but I didn't have any laying around of the right gauge and length. I just said, that sounds like too much work. I figure I can make this in 3 pieces. Something with 17 by 19 inches, which is the X and Y dimension of the dust cover. It's actually made ½ an inch bigger than the dimensions I specified, just so it doesn't fit too tightly, and that's fine. I'm still going to make the support 17 by 19, and it could just be an outer frame, but then you'd still need to have some way to attach that to the pieces that go down to the printer's frame. And I'd envisioned having 2 thin pieces of material coming down with a slot on the bottom that would fit over the printer's top frame, and the spacing would be such that it rests up against the left and right x-axis, or no, the left and right z-axis motor screw brackets, so that it wouldn't slide sideways. It would just use those for position or positioning or indexing. So I figured 2 pieces, could make them out of wood. I have lots of wood laying around, scraps and stuff. This top piece could be a thin piece of plywood. It could be a piece of acrylic if I've got something of the right dimensions, but it also has to be something that's reasonably stiff. I don't want it to be floppy because it'll be suspended at these points only. I don't want it, you know, sagging towards the front and rear by more than a little bit. Of course, I could put a reinforcing piece on there to give it more stiffness, and I might have to do that. So right now I have to scrounge around and see, especially what I can use for this top piece. Okay, scrounging through my junk piles. I do have some scrap. It's actually a pretty large piece of scrap. I could use this for some picture frame, but I'll just pick up another sheet of it the next time I'm at the hardware store. This is acrylic. It's 3/32 inch, I think, thereabouts. It's a little saggy without reinforcement, but it's big enough for a 17 by 19 sheet. I have some leftover pine. a couple other strips like this that are scrap from some other project I did recently, and I can easily cut that down and make a couple of reinforcing strips to go around the edge and just give it a little more rigidity, a little sag resistance. Doesn't need to be very much, just has to hold its own weight and the very light weight of the draped dust cover. And then for the vertical pieces, I want this to be fairly minimal, so I've got some 1/4 inch craft plywood, which will probably be just about the right strength for what I'm trying to do. So I've got to do some more dimensioning of a detail nature, make sure I have these figured out, and then cut all these pieces and get busy putting them together. Since this is a larger piece, I don't always have such good luck breaking these after scoring them. When it's a larger dimension, it doesn't always break cleanly, so I'm just going to use the bandsaw. Okay, on my 1/4 inch thick craft plywood here, I've got marked out the 2 rectangles I need for the supports. I think once again I'm just going to cut these on the bandsaw. Precision and absolutely straight lines is not a requirement. Okay, these are 10 inches by 3 inches. I've marked the acrylic sheet actually on the protective plastic covering. So this is where the vertical frame of the printer is going to be. This is the front, this is the rear, and these will span like this. I think I'm probably going to want something to go between these on the back side, just a thin strip to keep them from doing this. So I'm going to have a piece that's 11¼ inches long of pretty much anything. It could even be a dowel rod. That it might actually be a good choice for this, but I might use another strip of scrap wood. I have to go looking again. Okay, there are the vertical parts, and I think I do want to put some sort of a picture frame like a rim around this, just to keep it from sagging in the long dimension. I'm not sure that it's going to have a problem sagging this way because it's going to be supported here and here, and those will be screwed onto the plywood pieces, and those will be stabilized with the stabilizer, so that dimension should be pretty good. It's flexing this way that I'm concerned about, so I'm just going to put some little strips of pine along the edges of this. This is called winging it. I've done no calculations or empirical tests. I just figured that for the small amount of stress that'll be on this, a half thickness of this by this dimension, and that's what is it? It's about 3/8 of an inch, and this is 1 inch. If I rip it in half, then that'll give me 2 strips that long, and I think those will be just about the right size. Since I'm using my tabletop as a bench, I'm just going to use my bevel saw. Sticks. Alright, the smallest sheet metal screws I have are number 6s. It's a little large. I thought about going down to a number 5 or a number 4, but I only have those in machine screws, so I would have to tap holes. And you can tap holes in wood, but I figured for this I'm just going to drill slightly oversized not clearance holes, but pilot holes, so that even though it's going into just a 1/4 inch piece of wood, it's only going to barely have the threads engage, and it shouldn't split the wood. These pieces, it's no problem. I can go with a tighter fit. It's on these pieces here, anchoring them from the tops, where I want to go a little more generous on the pilot holes. I don't think I need to put any kind of a reinforcement on these to make them a little wider at the tops. I don't think I need to, but I don't know, maybe I will. Thinking about that. Yes, I am going to put some reinforcements where the wood meets the acrylic. Just cutting these off of some scrap I cut off of the other pieces. In the name of expediency, I'm going to use a hot melt glue for this, but before I do that, and while I'm waiting for the gun to heat up, I'm going to use the bandsaw to cut the slots that go onto the printer frame. So that's the shape. The frame is approximately 1/4 inch wide or thick, and near the bottom I'm going to bevel it off a little bit to help guide the frame into the slot. Okay, those two pieces are made. So I did a test here with the size of pilot drill I figured would be good into a scrap piece of wood, and drove one of the screws in, and it doesn't seem to be causing any distress or bulging of the wood, so I think that'll be fine. Okay, I have one of these pieces put in here just as a test fit. Seems to have worked out pretty well. I'm gonna have to take it off again, but to remove the plastic sheet and so on, but I'm also going to be sanding the corners of these, this plexiglass or this acrylic just a little bit, but I'm going to now fit the other side. Okay, there's that test fit. Okay, so far so good. Now I just have to unmount this from the top temporarily and drill the holes and mount these reinforcing strips, peel or sand the corners of the plastic here, peel the protective cover off, put it back together. Okay, I've got one of these reinforcing strips clamped on so I can drill all the holes and keep them in alignment. Okay, there's the acrylic panel all drilled, lightly sanded along the cut edges, and given a perfunctory wipe with some Windex just to get all the dust off of it. And now it's just a matter of bolting everything together, or screwing everything together. Okay, the reinforcing strips are on, and now I'm going to do a little corner sanding just so it doesn't snag on the dust cover. I want the corner to be a little more rounded. Okay, all the corners are rounded. Just a little dust sticking on there. And I used my old trick of using the edge of a steel straight edge to scrape diagonally along the edges of the plexiglass to just take off any little burrs that came from sanding the edge. That peels it off quicker than any other method I know and leaves a nice sort of a micro bevel along the edge. So let's bolt up the whatever we're calling this part. Okay, there it is. This was about an hour's work from start to finish. So not very time consuming. I think that the trick will be to make sure the darn thing fits on the printer and looks like it's going to align with the dust cover. Okay, there it is. Its front and rear overhang is appropriate for the back of the extruder cable and hanging straight down along the front of the cabinet and the front of the display. The left side is in line with the left motor here. The right side is in line with the right side of the printer. And there's maybe about a quarter of an inch of clearance above the top of the reel. And you can see how those slots slip over the frame, and then they can't go left or right because of these brackets here. And the dust cover will just drape from that straight down on all sides, and whenever I want to remove it, it's just a matter of lifting it off and sticking it aside. I can even do that with the dust cover on it. So I think that was a successful little project. So since I don't have the dust cover yet, I just made a little mock-up out of paper. It'll be something like that. Ta-da!